Mitzi, where and when were you born?
I was born in Manila, Philippines. I was born on October 27, 1997.
So that makes you a Scorpio.
Yes, exactly.
And do you identify with having deep, passionate feelings, but maybe a veneer of calmness?
Yeah, it's actually really funny because I really identify with being a Scorpio. There are so many things and aspects about it that I see myself as.
Like what? I want to hear.
Well, the how Scorpios are usually described as really calm, but if you betray their trust or betray someone they love, that's when they get really angry. So I definitely identify with that. Like especially if you're going against someone or something that I love, that's something that really fuels me up and gets me angry.
Mm. What other three words describe you for someone who doesn't know you?
I would say, well, this is what I try to live by. I do my best to be nationalist, scientific, and mass oriented.
And what was the third?
Mass oriented.
Ah, so thinking in terms of the people, the grassroots. Ah.
Exactly.
Um, and do you have siblings?
Um, I have two siblings. One is a half sister, and one is an adopted brother.
And are they climate activists as well?
They're really young. I hope they will be in the future, but right now they're like 6 and 8. Oh no,
Oh,
sorry, 6 and 7.
oh, yes. Well, that's good. Then you can bring them up properly.
Exactly.
And where are you in school or work or what are you doing?
I just graduated last year from the University of the Philippines. I took up BS Mathematics. Yeah, and then now I'm a climate activist.
I'm impressed that you majored in math. That I traditionally women haven't been encouraged to do that. There was some Barbie doll with a voice who said math is hard or something like that. So there, yeah, it was a while ago and people really protested. But in your program, what percent roughly were female of the math students?
Hmm. There were quite a lot in our batch. It differs per batch, but then it's pretty well balanced considering that it is a math course and a science course really where in a lot of countries and even in the Philippines it's not supported, it's not encouraged for women to take up science courses. But surprisingly, there was quite a good number in our course.
And what encouraged you to do that? What made you think I can do math, I can do science?
Um, I came from an all girls high school, so they really encourage people to go into science and technology as well. So it was very much about empowering women and making sure that we know that we can do whatever it is that we want to do or set our minds to. And my high school teacher in math, her name was Miss Apples. She was so supportive and such a good teacher, and that just really made me fall in love with math.
Mm. In the future, if you look for a career, what would be of interest to you in math field?
Right now, I am working with an NGO that's about the environment, and I am able to use my math skills there with data analysis and stuff because my undergraduate thesis was on the correlation of meteorological factors with air pollutants in Manila. So it's very connected to the climate movement, even in the environment. So I'm able to use that when in the movement and in work.
What NGO are you working with?
Um, right now, I'm the convener of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, and we're being helped out by the Center of Environmental Concerns and Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment.
Mm. And may I ask, is it a volunteer position or do they pay you?
It's a volunteer position.
Ah, so you're living at home.
Yes, but there is an allowance.
Uh huh. Um, how long has that organization been around? Who founded it? And what are they emphasizing? What are their priorities?
So Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines was actually just founded last year, 2019. I was one of the founders. It is an alliance of individuals, youth formations, and student councils. So my other organization, Agham Youth, which means Science Youth, was one of the co-founding organizations, and I was the one who represented them. And then the other co-founding organization is Sari Buhay, which means biodiversity in Filipino. So yeah, and then what their goal is we have five main unities. The first is urgency of climate action, climate justice, youth-led collective action, defend environmental defenders, and then systemic change.
Fabulous. So in terms of systemic change, in the U.S., the focus is on the Green New Deal and having green jobs and doing things for the infrastructure that make work for people. What would your goal be for changing the system?
Well, with our system right now, we're seeing a very, how do I put it, profit-oriented and wasteful system, like all over the world in terms of our production and in turn of our production, our consumption as well. And what we really need instead of that is a system that's needs-based and is actually planned, not because of profit or greed, but because of what people need and what is sustainable. Because if we really did just stick to what people needed to not just to survive but to live, it could be really sustainable, because there's so much that we're wasting because of profit, and it just goes to the pockets of a few when so many are already suffering. So it really should be like a needs-based, sustainable society that prioritizes people and the environment so that we can have a sustainable future.
I read that in the U.S., Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, maybe Mark Zuckerberg, the three of them have as much wealth as 25% of the lowest population. So it's just gotten worse in terms of the rich people. And what could you do with all that money? I mean, a human being doesn't need billions of dollars.
Like, people have said that they could live their entire lives and they're not going to finish the money no matter what they do.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. So, do you have a policy like the Green New Deal that you're presenting to the government, or what specific goals are you working for in the near future?
We have one coming up, but it hasn't been announced yet as of this time. But as of right now, it's just a People's Declaration for Climate Emergency. So we're still at that level, and then the youth is in charge of, like, what I'm doing is the youth is in charge of raising awareness among the youth, building up the movement, and then the other NGOs we're involved with are making sure to tap the other sectors like the peasantry, the fisher folk, and making sure that, and the scientists, of course, and that from that we're gonna start building policies out of it.
I see. Well, yeah, you've been around less than a year, so it takes a lot of thinking to organize. Just as a footnote, how did your English get so good?
Sadly, I guess, colonization. No, I'm kidding. It is one of the main languages here. Like, in school, we use English to teach. Our constitution is in English. It's something that even the people who aren't educated formally, they also know a bit of English because our media is also in English. So it's like that.
It amazes me to think that the islands, that little tiny island, we're all over the world speaking their language. It's amazing. And why then? Why not Chinese or Telugu or whatever it is? It's a interesting phenomenon to think about. You have, I would say, an eccentric president. What is Duarte's attitude about climate change?
Well, he doesn't even, well, okay. how do I start? For COP25, leading up to COP25, so last year, um, what he said to the Climate Change Commission, so we have a commission that's dedicated to climate change, is just sign whatever, like just automatically sign whatever. But the problem with that is, if we're just signing automatically, that doesn't mean that he's actually going to make plans for it. If they're not, how are you going to make plans if you don't know what you're signing? So there's that, and there's also a great lack of support for our Climate Change Commission and for our environmental departments in the Philippines. But the worst, I think, is this is the president with the most number of deaths of environmental defenders. If I'm right, it should be around 100. I can get back to you in that number, but I know it's around 100. In 2018, we had 30 killings by the military and paramilitary, making us the #1 country in the world for most dangerous, making us the most dangerous country in the world for environmental defenders. And in 2019, we had 46 deaths, but Global Witness no longer counted the other countries, so we don't know what the ranking is, but it got so much higher from 2018.
I know South America, Latin America has a lot of environmental deaths too.
In 2017, I know Latin America was the first, and then it's like a competition. We beat them in 2019, in 2018, but then in 2019 we don't know the number anymore. And interestingly enough, the first ever environmental defender that got killed during the Duterte regime was a climate activist. She was an old woman from the province called, her name is Gloria Capitan. She was protesting against the coal-fired power plant because her grandchildren and herself were having health problems because of the pollution that was happening.
And the paramilitary killed her? Did they make it look like an accident? Did they try to think, oh, too bad, whoops?
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy because it's not an uncommon thing in the Philippines where like these extrajudicial killings, they just happen and people are already getting desensitized to it, that it's just a number to them at this point. Like before, if you heard someone was dead in the news, you'd be shocked, but now it's just it's not even newsworthy anymore. Like people have stopped reporting on it because it just happens so often, and it's a horrible thing to get desensitized to.
It's like Trump lies. After 12,000, it doesn't affect you the same way. Well, Duarte, his focus, as I understand from the news here, has been on getting rid of drug traffickers, and so people, I guess, think, oh good, I don't want drug dealers in my neighborhood, but killing them isn't exactly the judicial way to deal with the problem. And they're poor, a lot of dealers, so that's all they have they think to feed their family. So there's other ways to deal with it besides killing people.
And they're not killing the actual drug lords that are, not just killing, they're not doing anything to the actual drug lords that are doing this. So like, it's just going to keep continuing because there will always be people, as long as we still have these economic problems, there will always be people willing to be drug mules.
Sure.
Because it's easy money. And you have to get to the root of the problem, which is that people don't have jobs, and that these rich drug lords, they're the ones that are really enacting these things.
Right. Yeah, it's the same in the U.S. Well, it's probably the same everywhere. So what's interesting to me is that around the world, there's kind of an upswelling of populist support for these strong men, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, and Duarte in the Philippines, and Trump in the U.S., and Erdogan in Turkey. I'm sure you've thought about that. Because all those guys are climate deniers, so those autocrats are really holding back the movement. Have you thought about why they're elected freely? Like Bolsonaro, I think it was an honest election. Trump, kind of.
I think people are so desperate for change that when you hear a strong man going, Trump's "I will make America great again." Duterte's "change is coming." I don't know the slogans of the others, but I'm sure it's something radical, sounding radical and grand and like, oh, I'm the hero. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make everyone's lives better. And people are just so desperate for change that they're just like, yes, okay, sure. He seems like he's gonna do it because he's a strong man and he's just like us. He curses. He makes jokes. He's like me, like as a man. He's like me. So yeah, sure. And it's just it's telling that people just really want a change in the system, but it's not happening because we're putting our trust in these men that aren't actually thinking of the people but just themselves.
Right. How did you get involved? What made you decide, I know it's an issue and I'm reading about it, to I know it's an issue and I'm going to get involved, I'm going to do something?
Well, before I was a climate activist, I was already a students' rights activist and a human rights activist. Yeah. I started in 2017, if I got that right. Yeah, around 2017, I became part of my college's student council, and being part of student council requires you to really know what's happening to the students, to the community around you, and that really just opened my eyes because we were able to integrate with a lot of our indigenous people, a lot of our basic sectors, and there was something with, sounds cheesy, but there was something within me that just couldn't sit still and like not do anything about it, because there's a quote in Filipino. It's like, it goes, kapag mulat ka na, kasalanan ng pumikit. So it just means once you've opened your eyes, it's a sin to close your eyes or to turn back to people.
That's
so
great.
It's just, I couldn't take it. I couldn't take not doing anything about it at that point because I knew that people needed it and people are suffering about it. And then I got into climate activism because I've always been an advocate for the environment, even as a child. And I got really involved with some of the local groups here, and we saw that there was a need for a youth alliance because there are a lot of youth organizations, but since they're organizations, they're very limited reach. But since it's an alliance of individuals and organizations, the reach is much wider, and we need that right now. We need a broad alliance of youth really pushing for this because we need people to be noisy about it, and that's what the youth does best, I think.
How many individuals and organizations roughly are in the Youth Alliance now?
I do not have the right number. There are a lot more individuals than organizations. Let me count in my around 14 or 15 organizations. I might be forgetting a few. And then the individuals are around above 50 or 60.
And they're from all over the Philippines?
Right now it's from the Metro Manila, so our capital, and a bit after that. So it's just, we started in September last year. So it's still growing outside of the immediate region, but we are starting to get into contact with the groups outside of Manila. But since it's so far away, we're having troubles giving them orientations and stuff like that. So it's been a process that's a bit slower.
Do you do most of your meetings face-to-face or online?
As much as possible, we try to do it face-to-face because in provinces especially, the internet connection isn't as good, and it's different when you're face-to-face. Like you have a deeper connection in a way. But if we really can't, then yes, we do it online.
And of the people who come to those meetings, roughly what percent are young women?
We actually have a lot of young women leading their organizations or being the representative for climate. Maybe around 50 to 60, around half.
Okay. And that's fairly unusual because around the world, it's many more young women who are leaders and in the media and in the forefront. Why do you think that there are as many young men involved in Manila?
Young men or young women, sorry?
Yeah. Well, what's unusual is that you have as many men as you do. So what are you doing to bring them into the fold?
I think it's because the core team is made up of women and men. Like we made sure that it was equal, more or less. So but then these men that we're with, they're actually they're definitely feminists and they're very polite. They make sure that they don't talk over us and especially things like that. So I think their friends are also, of course, men, and then it just grows the same way that women grow. But then we are seeing a lot more women as they're a lot more active than our men, but they're there too.
Okay. Do you think of yourself as a feminist? Do you use that word?
Yes, there is just some, because if you look at the strict definition of feminism, it is just the gender struggle, looking at men against women, not against women, but men and women as the thing, or gender, not necessarily the binary. But I think it goes beyond that as well. There is, in like a richer woman would have a bit more power over, let's say, a farmer man. So there is that dynamic that we have to look into as well. But yeah, I think I'm definitely a feminist, as long as you remember that it's not just men versus women. It's not just, oh, all men are bad. No, there are men. It's not an automatic. If you are a man, you are capable of oppressing women. Because here in the Philippines, we've had a woman president, which is like, wow, you have a president that's a woman, but she has killed so many farmers, so many fishing communities, so much of the urban poor, so many activists. So you really start to question is this really the progressive way? Just because she's a woman,
That was Imelda Marcos.
Yes, exactly. There's her too.
With all the shoes, thousands of shoes, expensive shoes. Oh my goodness. Is that who you were thinking of?
No, she's the wife of a dictator, but we had an actual president. Her name was Gloria Macapagal. She was already, it's crazy because she was already involved in a scandal that proved, like, it was a joke. People knew that she made sure that she won. Like, there's a recorded telephone call of hers asking how many votes she has already. But she still won, and she still became president, and now she has a position again, although she was already tried and proven guilty. And it's crazy how it doesn't change.
What's her position now?
She's part of the Congress.
Money talks, doesn't it?
Yes, it definitely does.
When you're organizing globally, there's a lot of effort to be democratic, have flat organizing structure, not have hierarchy. But my question to you is, how do you make sure things get done if there's a suspicion of structure?
I think it's because here in the Philippines we have some structure. We do have like a committee, not really executive committee, but we do have like a convener and then the officers for certain tasks. But I think what's really important is making sure there's open communication and really making sure that when you make decisions, you consult everyone. Like, it's a democratic process, and it is the majority over the minority, and we have to be open to criticism and self-criticize as well, so people see that it's okay for them to criticize us as leaders, and vice versa, because it's so important to recognize that criticisms are here to help us improve and be better people, and in turn have a better movement.
And how are the those core leaders selected? Are they self-selected, or because you're so new, or is there a voting process, or how?
At the start of it, it was the people who started it, the founders. But then now we are in the process of selection and voting. So it's a lot. It got longer because of the quarantine, so it got put on pause. But because we're trying to make sure that people vote in person instead of online, so that there's no. It's also a lot more transparent that way, and easier to check compared to an online vote where people can just add in their votes in any name. So we're still trying to figure out. But if this quarantine goes any longer, we might start considering online voting.
Or what we do here is vote by mail, and then you have a paper ballot.
Ooh, mail isn't really a thing here, but yeah, we could definitely. I wouldn't know. We don't have mail. We don't have post. I don't know what they're called even. Those things on the streets where you put the
mailboxes, we call them, or mailboxes.
Oh, there. Okay, mailboxes. We only have post offices that we have to go to, and I think they're closed right now because of the quarantine.
Ah. I just sat in on a call. You know the Sunrise Movement in the U.S. They did a call, and they're saying let's use the quarantine when people are at home and have more time to organize online. And they're starting a Sunrise School on Tuesday. You might want to join in. And they're going to teach people online, connect people, and organizing skills. And their whole goal is the Green New Deal. How do we get our legislators to support it? That's what they're focusing on. But it sounds like it's not easy to do vote by mail there.
We'll look into it. Maybe there is a possibility. I'm not sure until when certain offices will be closed. I don't think it'll be a long. I think they're going to resume some of the government offices soon. The Sunrise Movement, the Sunrise School thing sounds really amazing, because I feel like that is definitely something that we should start looking into, because right now we are participating in the digital strikes, so people are striking online with pictures, but it's good to raise awareness, and it gets people's interests again, but it's not as comprehensive as getting to talk about the actual issue, which is a very important thing. Like, we really need to make sure that people are educated and people know what's happening, the science behind the climate crisis, and why we're doing this in the first place. So that's really important. We're going to look into the Sunrise School.
I'll send you the link. It would be really great to have it be global, and then you could add what you've learned. So of that organizing team, how many people are there? The core organizers?
There are 6 of us, yes.
And how many are female and how many are male? Or whatever they call themselves.
4 are female, and then 2 are male.
Okay, so you do fit in the stereotype that women are the leaders. You said that but the men as well understand power dynamics, like men tend to speak over women or monologue or expect people to think they're right. How did those men know that? Did they learn it in school, or do they read about it online? How did they get educated? That's pretty neat.
Well, I mean, of course it's not every single time, and it's not all of the men completely at the same level, but the people in the positions, at least. We also have like educational discussions with women sectors, and integrating with basic masses that are women, I think really exposes them to these realities. And I think it's just it should be basic human decency, but it's not. But since they're so welcome and open to criticism and self-criticism as well, it's really easy to point it out because, of course, sometimes they don't even know that they're already doing it because it's something that they were brought up in and they just think it's normal, but it's not really. So it's really good that they're open to us calling them out and just be like, oh, what you did here, what you said here wasn't very respectful, and then explain why and what they can do to resolve it.
Do you include evaluation and self-criticism or criticism as part of your meetings routinely?
Not every meeting, but we do it around quarterly, maybe, or if it's needed, then we do it right away. But if not, then it's around quarterly.
And what kind of issues have come up in terms of we've got to change such and such?
Any major issues? None come to mind since we are such a new org, and before this, we were all already working together more or less. Our organizations, our separate organizations, were all already sort of working together, so we knew how to work together already. But I think what's important is we don't actually wait for the actual meeting with the criticism and self-criticism before we talk to them. And so, like, small things, small issues that could have gotten bigger get resolved early on because we were already open to talking to them about it.
Neat. Why do you think it is that around the world young women are in the forefront?
That was actually news to me when I saw your questions, and it's really interesting and inspiring to see how more young women are stepping up and being empowered. But I think there's still a lot to be done when it comes to representing the most severely affected in the climate crisis. There are still a lot of young women in developing countries and urban poor communities, from the peasantry and fisher folk, that need to be empowered so that we can hear their stories as well. But I think generally the climate movement is very progressive in the sense of gender equality, and it recognizes the need to include women in leadership and in deciding things, because women are more affected by the climate crisis as well.
How so?
There is a statistic that more women are displaced by climate calamities, and I think since around 80% of the world's poor are women, they are more prone to the climate crisis. And when there's displacement, women and children are are more prone to violence and harassment during times when they're displaced from their homes because of climate calamities. And there are a few others that I don't really remember.
Yeah, no, that's true. And if there's drought because of climate change, young women have to walk farther to get water and firewood, and they can't go to school because they don't have time. So yeah, they're affected in all kinds of ways. But can you think of any other reason that women would themselves come to the forefront? They're not encouraged to do it; they did it, like Greta Thunberg or people like that. Or you?
Well, for my case, I was inspired by Greta Thunberg, and I think a lot of the other women here, it really helps how we're seeing women lead this, because it inspires other women and other young girls to think that, oh, they're listening to her, she can do it, then I can do it too. But what inspired Greta Thunberg as a female, as a woman, I don't know.
Well,
But
she says part of it is being on the autism spectrum, that she could see things differently than other people, and not be normal and sit in front of the parliament on Fridays. Do you think that your generation seems unique in the early age at which people are activists and start movements and that? I don't think other generations had 9-year-olds and 11-year-olds that were starting good causes. What do you think there is about Generation Z that enables such young leadership?
I think because it might be because there's so much, no, not so much more problems, but there's well, first, of course, there's the internet, which helps so much, I think, because it helps you like really understand and learn more at a much younger age. And I think it also has a lot to do with some upbringing by parents that are a bit more progressive and generally, well, relatively, the times now are a bit more progressive in terms of gender equality and in terms of gender equality and in terms of things are getting better, but so people are more aware of what their rights should be. And also there's so much to learn from the past, like people's movements in the past before being encouraged. And I think it's also because the face of the climate movement is also a young person. So it really encourages people to, like the youth to be there. And in terms of the climate movement, who better to lead it and to participate in it than the youth who will be experiencing like the impacts of the climate crisis the longest. So I think the younger you are, the more you want to be there, because like I'm gonna experience this the longest because I'm so young. So I need to make sure that these things get fixed before that happens, because they don't have the legislative power as of this moment, right? They can't vote yet, they can't enact policies, but then they can add pressure to the government, to the people, to adults to vote for the right people and stuff like that.
An issue for young people in the West, I don't know if it's true there, is that there's increasing rates of anxiety and depression, especially among young women. And I wonder if people are talking about that there or if it's not an issue.
I wouldn't say that it's not an issue. It's just something that isn't talked about as much. Mental health here is still kind of taboo. It's for students and people and richer people in a way, they are able to think of our mental health and making sure that it's okay. But a majority of the country in the Philippines, majority of people in the Philippines are part of our farmers and our fishing community and then our workers. And their experiences are so hard that they don't even have the time to think about their mental health as much. So it's like, I'm sure they have horrible anxiety and depression as well because of the things they're experiencing, because their family isn't eating or they're not eating or they can't go to school or their house just got blown away
or there's a typhoon. Yeah
exactly. So there's that to think about, but I wouldn't be surprised if the statistic is the same. There's a rise of this in here, but then we don't really have the means to check it because a lot of people don't get checked up, because healthcare here is also really expensive. So just seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist would be so expensive, and people would usually just prioritize their physical health because that's what they understand.
In your university, did they have a counseling center with therapists available for students?
In my university, I'm pretty lucky because we do. Our university is like the premier state university, but only because it gets so much more budget than everyone else's, which isn't fair either. But yeah, we have counseling, but then they are severely understaffed. Like the ideal is one counselor to 5 students, maybe. That's what they said. But then what they have is like one counselor to 2 colleges. So it's sad because sometimes they have to put you in a wait list, and then they weigh which students need it the most and like in the urgent way. So sometimes even if you do need something, there's someone who needs it more, so you won't be able to see them for a very, very long time.
What about among your friends? Did they talk about being anxious? Some climate activists talk about climate anxiety.
With my friends, yeah, it's a bit more open with us. We understand mental health because we are privileged to have the education about it. Um, as of climate anxiety, we have it from time to time, but I think I wouldn't want to speak for the entire global south, but at least in the Philippines, because there's so many other issues that are facing people right now, it's hard to be anxious about 10 years from now. I mean, yeah, you're like, no, 10 years, we have a deadline, but then also people don't have things to eat now. Our public transport is horrible. Our oil prices are rising. Our food prices are rising. Everything's rising. So it's just like, instead of being anxious about the climate in 10 years in the future, a lot of us are anxious about today, tomorrow, the immediate future.
Right. Were you able to go to COP or any meetings like that outside the country?
No, not COP, but I was able to go to an international school of ecology in Mauritius, Africa, last year, October. It was really nice because it was just a bunch different climate activists from, not necessarily climate activists, environmentalists from all over the world, just talking about how to solve this climate crisis, and we had a lot of like speakers, and it was really inspiring to meet people and to see how a lot of people in Africa, the problems that they were experiencing were so similar to the Philippines.
Right. In terms of the quarantine, have you had cases of people who have the virus?
Yes, we have, but we're not testing that much here. So it's hard to gauge what the real number is, but let me check right now how many cases we have. Update. So what the problem here is, people are so afraid because it's so vague. Like, we have no idea what's happening. When the Department of Health is asked by journalists or health workers, sometimes they don't really give a straight answer. They're like, oh yeah, sure, around this, it's very vague answers. Okay, so we've had 380 cases, 25 deaths, and 15 recovered. And then 340 active cases. The problem here is we're also seeing politicians being tested twice sometimes, when a lot of people need it so much more, and they're not being allowed to test because, oh, you don't have all the symptoms yet we have these politicians that are being tested even if they have zero symptoms. But it's crazy, and the way they're responding to this is they're deploying military and policemen instead of health workers. So that was their main response. Like, our very first press con about it was like, oh, we're gonna deploy military men. You have to love your military men. And you're just like, how is that a response to a health crisis? What are they gonna do? Like, shoot the virus? It's stupid.
They could make people stay home.
Well, yeah, but then people still need to work. Like, they're not gonna be able to eat. What they did was the crazy lockdown that's happening now is, so Metro Manila, the region, is locked, but there are provinces that are so near to us that it's almost Manila. Some people live there because it's cheaper, but then they work here, and they still have to go to work, but they can't go in. There was recently a cancer patient who had to walk so long, and she only had one leg, and she had to walk so long because there is no public transport available, because it's supposed to help us keep a lockdown. But then let's say we have health workers who don't have private cars, they still have to go to work, so they either have to walk or they have to wait for the government provided vehicle, which cramps them up together and is not safe for them. So it's really defeating the purpose, because people still need to go outside to work and to eat, but they can't anymore because of all these things.
Got it. An issue for activists is burnout. You know, people just get so tired of phone calls and meetings and being online and not seeing enough progress. Is that an issue for your youth alliance? And if so, how do you cope with it and nurture people?
Usually, let's say outside of this extraordinary case where there's a lockdown, educational, like really building our awareness and education on it helps a lot. But that's only one side of it. There's also, we try to really do our best to make sure that we go to the sectors that are vulnerable to the climate crisis. So we talk to fisher folk that are nearby, we talk to farmers, we talk to our indigenous people, the environmental defenders. And I think really hearing their stories reminds you why you're doing this. And it's so important to always keep that to heart. Otherwise, you really will get burnt out because, especially in the Philippines, it's a slow process of popularizing the climate movement. Like right now, we're still trying to popularize the word climate justice because it's still pretty vague. Some people use it as a term to just give justice to Mother Earth, but like there's no calling for accountability from carbon majors. And I think that's what's so important, that we have to keep in mind why we're doing this and who we're doing it for. But you're definitely right that during this time where everyone's locked up in their houses and all we can do are online meetings and calls, it's getting a bit more difficult. People are starting to get really tired because we can't really see what's happening. And there's also, of course, the fear of the virus and everything. But what we're doing now is we're making a song and dance about the climate justice, and it's really bringing people's like spirits up because music is always fun. Like it's such a nice way to uplift your spirit. And now we're making one about climate justice, and it should come out around the end of the month. Yeah, the end of the month, maybe next week or next week. And we're really excited for that, and we're really hoping that it also brings other people's spirits up.
Are you going to sing and dance in the video?
I'm not sure if I need to, because we're having troubles recording and not everyone has stable internet connection. If I really, really, really need to, but if I don't, I'm gonna let the other members shine through and have them do that.
So someone composed a brand new song about climate justice?
Not just one person, it was a collective effort. 2 people worked on the melody, and then maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 even people worked on the lyrics. And then we all gave comments to it and made sure that it was understandable, it was easy to sing, and stuff like that.
You have to please send me a link.
Yes, definitely, of course. I'll send it to you once it's done.
What do you find in terms of art images that work on flyers, posters, internet posts? Because it's an image can be worth 1,000 words. So what do you find are effective images?
In our graphics and posters, we usually use pictures where there are a lot of people. So the strikes with the signs, because like the signs will say what we're asking for, and the people will say, well, the number of people will show how many people want this and are calling for this. I think it also helps to use, like in terms of visual, it helps to use like moving pictures, like GIFs or videos even, because it catches people's attentions more. Yeah, generally like that.
What if you translated the slogans that you think are really effective on signs and such? What would the slogans say?
Sigaw. The shout, the calls of the youth save the environment. It sounds so much better in our language. It goes, sigaw ng kabataan, sagipin ng kalikasan. But yeah, it roughly translated, the calls of the youth save the environment. But mostly we actually use English calls. We say climate justice now. The tagline of our org, yakap, which means hug in Filipino, is embrace the call to save the earth. Yeah, we mostly use English because a lot of the people that are online, at least, are English speaking. So we have to adapt to that. But when we're talking to people who are in the streets and not online, we use Hustisyang Pangklima Ngayon Na, which basically means climate justice now.
How many different languages are spoken in the Philippines? A lot, huh?
Oh, I do not have the number for that. But most of the country, I think, speak Filipino, which is, well, no, not most of the country, meaning that most people speak it, but since it is the national language, a lot of people know it or know at least a little bit of it. But there are other dialects that a lot more people speak that instead of Filipino. But because Filipino is the language being used in the city center, where people and the rich people, the policy making people are. So a lot generally we use Filipino.
So, even in elementary school, were you taught in English and Filipino?
Most of our classes were in English, actually all of them, except our Filipino class. So it's like the opposite, where you would expect that we just have one English class where everything would be in English and then the rest would be in our local language, but that's not how it is here. In private school, at least. In public schools, I know most of them still, if not English completely, switch, like code switch. It's called Taglish in so Tagalog English. So it's just switching to get from word to word. Because sometimes, like let's say math, we don't have a lot of words for math terms, a lot of Filipino words for math terms, and for science as well. So it's like that.
It makes sense in a way because it's easier to get textbooks in English.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so, if you think about yourself 5 years from now, what do you imagine yourself doing?
I hope to still be part of maybe an NGO that's fighting for the environment and for the people. Still a climate activist, maybe, or maybe a different branch of environmentalism.
Hmm.
I'm not sure yet.
What groups do you look to around the world, like Fridays for Future or whatever, to get inspiration and information? When you go online, who do you look to?
Fridays for Future is one. March for Science, if you're familiar with them.
Is it in the U.S.?
Yeah,
Well, we've had Marches for Science, but I don't think it's an organization.
there is one. There's an organization. I think they're mostly based in New York. Yeah, because they're the branch that we're talking to. Yeah, and then we have some local groups too that we look up to. So there's AGHAM, which means science. They're professionals that are science and technology for the people advocates. There's also Gabriella's Women's Party List. It's a party list, but it's also an organization. It's a women's sector, and there's also health groups that we look up to, and we consult in times of because the climate crisis is a health crisis, right? So it's also linked to each other. But definitely, right now we're talking to them about it and asking them how this coronavirus will pan out, what their suggestions are.
What about UN youth climate organizing through the UN?
Sorry, what?
What the UN has youth climate organizing groups. Do you look to the United Nations at all?
Not really, because we see that a lot of the UN's policies have also enacted problematic policies here in the Philippines. But we do look at some of the sustainable goals, SSG?
Sustainable Development Goals.
Oh, SDG, yeah.
Yeah. How questionable how they try to impose solutions that weren't geared for the Philippines?
I'm not that well versed into it because it's our we have someone who's a lawyer in our organization. She's the one who's really. But what she's explained to me is there are a lot of policies that are very, I'd say, pro-US or yeah, because of the UN. But I mean, generally, I'm okay with the UN. But we're just careful. We're just a little bit careful because it's so hard to like the language, the formal language is sometimes when you read it, it seems okay, but then when it's actually being enacted, it's like, oh, it meant different. So.
That's good to know. How do you cope with backlash? Maybe you don't get it, but a lot of climate activists get trolled and if they're striking on the streets, they get negative comments. Have you had to put up with that? And if so, how do you cope?
So far, the climate deniers who have been commenting on our posts aren't from the Philippines. We don't have a lot of climate deniers here only because climate isn't really a well-known thing yet. But there are a lot of trolls in terms of other issues. Like recently, I tweeted something about the healthcare policies in the Philippines, and so many people reply, and you're sure that they're paid trolls because their accounts were just made and they're not following anyone else. And there's a script that they copy paste sometimes and they comment on Facebook. Yeah, if you look it up, this regime is the one that's really the most famous for using online trolls that are paid. Like you're sure that they're paid because they have scripts, and sometimes they commented on the wrong posts that it has nothing to do with the post at all. So you're sure that it's not like an organic thing. I think when dealing with that, you have to check first who are actually concerned and have actual questions, and if you can still talk to them and reach out to them, definitely. But then if you know that you can't change their mind, especially online, because it's so hard to change someone's mind through comments. Like at least video calls, it's easier, or at least a call because you can hear their voice. But if it's just through comment and you're reading it, it's so easy to get misunderstood and you might not get anywhere. So it's better to just save your energy to actually talk to people who can actually be convinced.
What about when you're striking on the street? Do you get comments from people passing by?
The general comment of, oh, someone's rallying again or striking again. But what we've done in the past, since we don't do weekly strikes here, what we've done is we've had a strike in March, or was it May? Then September, and then November. Then we made sure that it was really colorful and different so that people would be curious and come to us and listen to us. So in September, what we did was we made a kind of like a human collage where from the bird's eye view, it looks like the Earth. I can send you a picture. It's a human Earth formation. So we had like cards above us, and then we formed the shape of the Earth.
With your bodies?
With a circle. With the cards.
Oh.
So it's like a pixelated thing, and then squares.
Oh, like it.
And then in November, because in the Philippines, Christmas starts in September. So, and we have these things called paroles or they're like lanterns, and it's a thing that it's really popular in the Philippines. It's part of our culture. So what we did was a lantern parade. So people brought their lanterns, and it had their calls on it. And of course, they were all recycled materials. I could also send you pictures because the lanterns that people made were so beautiful.
I'd love to see them. Oh, that's brilliant to build on what's already traditional. Is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of being an effective organizer, or the role of young women or Gen Z that we haven't talked about?
I think the youth have to remember, especially now because the climate movement is kind of being a trend, or it's popular, and that's amazing. Of course, it's definitely what we want, but we have to make sure that we go beyond just the trend. We have to really study and learn and understand what's happening in the climate crisis. I mean, I won't say that I've read the entire IPCC or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change SR Special Report 1.5, but I've read the summaries. So long, but there are a lot of materials online that explain it really simply. It would be best if you could read the whole thing, but I understand if that's difficult. But there are executive summaries available, and there are summaries online that are available. And it's so easy to really learn about the climate crisis right now, and it's so important that we back ourselves with knowledge so that we know what we're talking about, and it also fuels us. And of course, you have to make sure that we listen to the marginalized people, the sectors that are actually affected the most by the climate crisis, because otherwise we might be making policies, or we might be suggesting policies that will actually make their lives harder. So you have to remember that. We really have to remember the people, the majority of the people that are experiencing this the most. So yeah. And of course, I'm going to say our tagline, so embrace the call to save the earth.
A problem in the U.S. is that young people don't vote very much. Old people vote. And they really swamped Bernie Sanders' campaign. He was counting on the young people to turn out, and they didn't. So I wonder if that's a problem there as well.
I think so, yeah. And a lot of us aren't even registered on, so there's that also. And there's also the problem that because I joined one of the kind of watchdogs during our latest election, and people would report if there was something wrong, and what you put in the ballot doesn't. It's not the same thing that comes out when they give you the ticket receipt or whatever, the digital thing. So, I mean, there's that too, where people sometimes don't see the use of voting, because when you do vote, what's written in the ballot is different. So, and a lot of places, votes would disappear or go missing because of technical difficulties, or the machines would shut down for hours on end. But I still think that despite that, it is so important to vote and to be involved in it, and to not let that hinder us from having a voice in it, because it is so important to have that.
In the U.S., there's a group called Rock the Vote, and they're geared towards getting young people to register and to vote. So that seems like it's an important part of the campaign is for people to vote.
That's true.
Great. Thank you.